This is Launching Your Daughter podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Now, here is today's episode. Episode 62. Well, welcome, courageous listeners. Yep, I thought I would start today's episode just a little bit different than I usually do. I was thinking I typically will tell the people that I work with, both adults and teenagers and younger, that when they come in and do the work, whether it's psychotherapy or it's coaching, that they're being very courageous. Even the past girls group that I just recently did was called Brave and Courageous. Because when we do that inner work, when we ask for help, when we step into the unknown, it takes courage to do that. So when you're tuning in and you're like, wow, I'm a parent of a daughter, I'm a caregiver of this amazing young woman, or I'm working with teenagers or just girls in general, this is, my acknowledgement of you for your courage in doing what you're doing. It does take effort. It does take sometimes those ups and downs, and you kind of roll with it, but you're doing it, and you're helping make our world a better place by getting the support that you need, by having that open communication with your daughter or that teen girl in your life, whether it's easy or not, and helping her guide through the life that she is envisioning that she wants, and rolling with those ups and downs that she's going with. And today's episode, I'm really excited about this conversation because it's all about relationships. And I hope that you find this as enjoyable as I did when I spoke with Karen. My guest today is Karen Rayne, who has a PhD in educational psychology. She has been working in education for the past 2 decades with an expertise in sexuality education. She began working in sexuality education in 2007 by providing comprehensive sexuality education classes for middle school students and human sexuality classes for college students through psychology departments. Dr. Rayne is passionate about providing comprehensive sexuality education to people of all ages and stages with sensitivity and a touch of humor. She founded Unhushed in order to expand her educational reach and to open family conversations about sexuality in the home. In addition to providing direct sexuality education to teenagers and adults and writing books, Dr. Rayne writes curriculum and trains sexuality educators in order to expand their skills. Dr. Rayne's newest books include Girl, Love, Sex, Romance, and Being You, and Help Your Kids with Adolescence. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Karen. Well, welcome, Karen. I am so excited to have you on today and for you to talk a little more about your new book, Girl, Love, Sex, Romance, and Being You. And I would love if you can tell our audience just a little more about you and why you wrote this book.
Yeah, sure. I got my PhD in educational psychology, and sexuality is sort of my content area. So I have a traditional educational background, and I've found that bringing that information to bear on sexuality education has been really great and a lot of fun. I wrote Girl, I think mostly because I'm just really passionate about people having information and wanting people to have as much information as possible. There's so much available on the internet now, but getting it all condensed into an accessible, readable, accurate format is hard to do if you're not sure where to start online. And so what Girl does is it brings all of that information around in this really fun, accessible, easy to read way that is inclusive of all people who identify as a girl, all teenagers who identify as girls, and provides them with a starting point, along with lots and lots of places to go and directions for more information, should what's in this book not answer all their questions.
Well, and I love what you have just talked about too, that you're so right. I love being able to provide information for folks, and it can be really overwhelming because there is so much out there. And if parents or girls are not sure where they could start to find out all kinds of information on being a girl, or those, as you say, identify as a girl, this is a great resource for that. And yeah, you have so many different extra links and websites they can go out to and get more information. And I just find it a very comprehensive book that I think many of my teen girls that I work with will really enjoy going over this book and having it really kind of at their fingertips, that if there's a question, they can go through that and look at it.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad that you really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun writing it. I definitely had to cut things out and not include parts. It might feel comprehensive, but as the author, I'm like, there's just these 2 more chapters. So, it's hard to cut things down, which is why I ended up putting in so many links and directions to other resources so that I felt like it could be a little smaller as its own resource.
Absolutely. And who knows, you may just have a sequel to this then if you've had so many different extra information that is like, okay, not this time. Nope, got to take that out. Who knows?
I talked with my editor about having like a second volume.
Yeah, exactly.
Where I could really dive into all of these like second level topics like religion and race and the law and medical history that is maybe more for the sex ed nerd than for the average person.
Well, those are, I love that because those really are important topics. And it is the book that you currently have, this book, I think it's not just the surface level, or it's like layer 1, and there you can still dive deep in it. But I love those, what you're talking about too, kind of an additional layer to possibly go into. So we'll keep that in mind.
Absolutely. And this is, not to sell the book short, it's verging on 400 pages. So it's hardly something that's like a breezy overview. But there's just so much to talk about.
There truly, truly is. And I know sometimes the girls, when they're when they talk with me about whether it is religion or spirituality or sex or what to do to date or not date, parents have some of those exact same questions, like, how do I even have discussions like this? So I'd like to kind of focus on today, you've got some great chapters. And again, I like the vignettes in each of these chapters written. Some of it is from other girls that have written in from other kind of perspectives on things. And I love how it helps raise questions and be able to kind of have dialogue, whether it's between parent and daughter or it's between, other peers. So I love the information. And I know you've got chapters on, the difference between hooking up and relationship. And what I would like to talk about today is more kind of dating, the chapter about dating, being in relationship, and then kind of ending relationships.
Yeah, I was going to say, those are 3 that I feel like are not often included in books about
Yes.
sex and sexuality.
Yes.
And so I was really excited to be able to include them in this one.
Yeah. So if we just kind of start off and we're talking about just dating in general, what are some ways that a girl could ask a person out?
Yeah, all of the ways. There's so many ways. And people in different parts of the country really answer this question differently. Mm-hmm. And of course, in different parts of the world. And for some people, it's about like a simpler kind of request, like, hey, do you want to go to the movies or something like that? It can be very low key. Some of the risks associated with that are that then people might not understand that they're being asked out on a date. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things that I do in my classes with teenagers is we talk about how to ask someone out and we role play it. And, try to specify, would the person you're asking out know that you're asking them out on a date, or would they think that you're just trying to be a friend here? And so making some of those intentions clear, I think, is really useful. And so that kind of takes it up to the next level. So it's not quite just a, hey, do you want to go to the movies? It's some statement of intention and appreciation of the person in that specific kind of romantic or sexual way. Like, hey, I really like you. Do you want to go out to the movies, right? That has this other kind of tenor to it. Mm-hmm. And then there are some places where really big, extravagantly asking someone out on a date is definitely the right way to go. The danger there, of course, is that You might put yourself out there and get a no. So it's important, I think, to take stock of the situation and how much are you willing to put yourself on the line, and how much do you think that what do you think the other person is going to want? When you're asking someone out, taking their perspective into account is really important. Are they the kind of person who wants something elaborate and big as a demonstration of your enthusiasm and excitement about going out with them? Or are they the kind of person who wants it to be a more private, intimate event?
Well, I love that. First, the role-playing piece of it. I do that so often with the girls that I work with, whether it's in a group setting or individually, when they kind of step up and do something different, kind of outside their comfort zone. Role-playing can be very helpful, and I encourage parents to do that as well. And sometimes, the girls are like, I don't want my parents to do that. That's just weird, goofy, So to be able to do that with others who they feel comfortable with, that's great. And I like that clarification that when you want to ask somebody out on a date, it is looking at putting the intention out there and making sure you kind of know what the other person likes, whether it's those big surprises or something more small and kind of intimate when being asked out, so they kind of know one another on that level. And as with anything, all relationships, friendships or dating, it takes risk, right? So they're being able to practice being in a relationship, dating or friendship, of how just to do that. So I love that. And I'm curious, you've talked about a little bit in the book too, is what is this new relationship energy? What do you mean by that?
Oh, yeah, that's a great term. And it's a term that actually comes from the polyamorous community, but I think that it's one that everybody should really adopt and start using, because what it speaks to is this excitement over, the initial relationship beginning moments. And when you're first getting to know someone and you don't necessarily know them well enough to be annoyed by things or or to be talking about anything serious. So it's all just lighthearted and fun still. And obviously a relationship can't stay there. One that's going to last a longer time or go to a deeper level that new relationship energy is going to dissipate, and other things are going to take its place, right? A deeper connection, a deeper level of trust, a deeper kind of love, a deeper kind of support during our more painful parts of life. But new relationship energy is really great, and relishing it, enjoying it is really important, as long as you can see it for what it is. And these are the moments when I feel like people make the mistake of cutting friends out of their lives, for example.
Yes.
Because they're so excited by that new relationship energy and wanting to spend all of their time in that kind of emotional, fun, lighthearted space, instead of being like, oh, this is great and really fun, and I still have all these other connections and responsibilities that I want to continue to honor.
Oh, I love that. And you're right. It's that new relationship energy isn't talked about a lot. And I was laughing when you had said, you don't know the person well enough to be annoyed by some of their behaviors or things that they say, right? And it's true. And I don't care if you're a teenager or you're an adult. As you get to know somebody, those things that may have attracted you at the beginning can sometimes become annoying later on. But that's when, you are opening up the dialogue more and talking about what's working and what's not as well within that. So I love that. So I'm curious, why would any girl really even want to be in a relationship?
Yeah, this is something I dive into in the book, and I think it's becoming more relevant and more talked about as an option of just not being in relationships, which I think is great. There's so many options in our world, and relationships are one of the many options available to us. But why stay focused there? I think that moving past that and saying, hey, there's so many things that are possible. Think about what it is that you want and where you want to be and how you want to live your life. And then let's see what we can do to further that. So being in a relationship can bring stability and emotional comfort and fun and pleasure, lots of really good things. And it can also be time consuming and take you away from your studies. And so there's good and bad, and acknowledging that that's the case with anything. anything you're going to do with your life is going to take time and energy away from other possibilities. So just being upfront about that, and I think with the increasing dialogue around asexuality and aromantic as sexual orientations, there's this deeper dialogue happening at the cultural level, certainly among teenagers, about why not to be in a relationship or how not to be in a relationship.
Yeah, I love that. And it really is, you've hit it that, in today's generation, there really is so many different choices out there. And it's not that, years ago where the thought was, I'm in high school, I have to be dating so that I can get married and I can move on, because that was more of kind of what was there and what was available, what was taught. And now it's more of a choice of whether you want to be in a relationship or you don't, you want to wait, you don't. There's so many options, I guess, out there.
Yeah.
And it's being able to know that you do have choices. Yeah.
I have a friend who was in high school in the 90s, which, wasn't that long ago, certainly not like the 50s or the 20s that we're talking about. And she went to her, and she was in a small rural community, and went to her counselor as a junior in high school and said, so I want to start applying to colleges. And her counselor said, oh, honey, why would you want to do that? There's lots of nice boys around here.
Oh.
So just opening up that dialogue of like, oh, what can we do? And the answer is so much,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for you, and I guess, again, part of the book, do you talk a little more, or let me ask this, what are, for parents that are listening out there, I know they often struggle with, what's the best age for my daughter or to be able to date? What should we tell her? Is it, she's got to be 30 years old before she's allowed out of the house and she can date? And I typically say, no. So what are, I guess, some appropriate ages, or what guidelines would be helpful for parents regarding dating?
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting question. And I tend to push back on the idea of ages, certainly, or as like a ruling factor. When I talk to most parents, they can definitely voice that kind of nervousness about their daughters, especially dating, issues around potential pregnancy risk and them feeling that their daughters are being taken advantage of, or sublimating their own hopes and desires and life goals in favor of this other person, this other partner. It's interesting that doesn't tend to be the issue with parents of boys. Parents of boys are much less likely to have those fears. And I think it comes from our idea that boys have an inner expectation and drive to succeed outside of a partnership. And so if we have that same expectation of our daughters, that they will succeed and meet their life goals, regardless of whether they're in partnership or not, that kind of expectation, the home environment might take off a little bit of that pressure about when they're able to or not able to. But the other thing that I tell parents is that it's not really up to them.
Yes.
That whether they want their daughter to date or not, if their daughter has feelings towards someone, that those feelings are going to be expressed and felt and dealt with one way or another, whether the parents are aware of it or not. One of my first book actually was a book for parents, and it's 10 Rules for Talking with Teenagers About Sex, and it came out 2 years ago. I think like 2 years ago this week, actually. And one of the things I say in that book is that as parents, when you have teenagers, your role shifts. With children, you're like their manager. So you have them, you have their schedule set out, you tell them when and what and how and all these things. And then when you have a teenager, your role shifts. You're no longer a manager, and instead now you're a contractor. So they bring you in based on how much they feel like they're going to benefit from your presence. And if you tell them that they're not allowed to do things that they are feeling substantially drawn to do, if you just put a blanket rule out against that, they're not going to want you to be their contractor. They're not going to bring you in that same kind of way. So you might have rules about things like curfew and respect and expectations about like, oh, I'm going to meet your boyfriend, but that's very different from just saying you can't have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, right? Any kind of partnership, dating kind of experience. So being open to that dialogue and asking questions like, tell me why you're interested in dating this person. I want to know more about that. That's going to get you much farther in your relationship and in supporting their healthy sexual development than if you were to say, no, you can't date until you're 17. That's pretty arbitrary.
You are so, spot on, because that is one of the things, as you said earlier, a lot of times parents' fears are coming up when it comes down to, okay, what's appropriate age or not age for my daughter to date. And it's one, for them to find some support and just exploring what those fears are. Is it truly about, pregnancies, them having sex, or what? And then what you're saying is for parents, they can, as long as they can remain somewhat calm, to have that open dialogue with their daughter about what are they interested in that person, like what has drawn them to that, to be more curious and explore those questions with her, can really create that ongoing foundation of trust that she will come to them more often than not about possible relationships with somebody versus, oh no, nope, you can't. It's like, well, they're in school most of the day, 5 days out of the week. So yeah, it's like when you say, no, you can't, they're going to see this person, whether you like it or not. And it's trying to create that safe place they can come and talk about the ups and downs of relationships, and where they can come and say what's working and what's not. So I love that. I'm curious, one thing that stood out to me too in one of these chapters, it was you talked about the thing that I sometimes hear from parents of teenagers, like, oh, they say they love the person. There's no way. And in your book, I loved how you're like, yeah, they can actually love this other person. And it's so true. It's trying to normalize that for parents. It really doesn't matter what age you are. You can have love towards somebody, whether they think it's age appropriate or not. You have those feelings.
Absolutely. Just yesterday I was teaching a class of middle schoolers, and this particular question came up of whether or not younger teenagers especially could fall in love. And I just loved what one of them said. They were like, yeah, of course they can. It's going to probably look different than somebody who's been married for 30 years, but that doesn't mean it's not love.
Yeah.
And I loved it that came from a middle schooler, just so much authenticity and really seeing things for what they are.
Absolutely. And yeah, love can look differently depending on the age or the longevity they've been in a relationship. But yes, it is totally possible. That is for sure. Love that. Well, one of the other chapters that I want to talk about before we end today is actually on ending relationships. And the one thing that also stood out to me in this chapter was like, do not call it dumping. And I'm like, oh, yes, I love that. This is just like, ouch, that's just harsh. So what are some tips and even ending a relationship, whether it's, let's just start there. What are some of the tips in ending a relationship?
There's a bunch of kind of standard ones that I feel like are useful to restate, like don't do it via text. That's just harsh.
Yes.
Unless you're in some kind of physical or emotional danger or you're at risk for something, right? In which case, of course, do it via text. So acknowledging the differences in the context and how that calls for a different kind of engagement on the part of the person who's doing the ending. And then the other thing that I think is really important to acknowledge is that just because a romantic or a sexual relationship has come to an end doesn't mean that the relationship itself was in any way a failure.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And so thinking about like, hey, this isn't meeting my needs, or it isn't meeting your needs, or for whatever reason, we're not gelling quite in the way that we had previously. So let's just shift the dynamic of our relationship and end this romantic and or sexual part of it. Is a much healthier way to think about it. The relationship itself can still have been fun and useful and thought-provoking and all of the things that somebody wanted out of it, and just in a certain time and place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I liked you also talked about in the book, right? It's you're celebrating and mourning could be at the same time of this relationship, right? Celebrating that you
Yeah.
had this relationship, that you both maybe have learned something. Maybe it's just clarity of the type of values that you're wanting more in a relationship, or the type of person that you think you gel better with, right? And then it's also for both people, it's mourning the loss of that relationship, because when it ends, it changes it. It's like that chapter that has been open is now coming to a close. And so it's normal to feel some sadness, to feel some hurt about the ending of it, that transition piece of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the person ending the relationship can still feel pain and sadness.
Yeah.
Not that they always do, of course, but that it can be there. And so acknowledging that and letting there be some mourning and grief is, I think, very healthy and very useful.
Yes, absolutely. And for parents to also, again, kind of support that process for them, that sometimes you may see your daughter come back at you and she's just really irritable, or she's just a little more angry about things, or she can't manage the conflicts like she typically does. And that's pretty normal when it comes to an ending of a relationship, friendship and or dating relationship. That some of that mourning part of it is just a shortness, because you're again going through a transition, and it's being there to say, hey, how can I support you? You look like you're having a difficult time today. And if she's like, nothing, I'm fine, being able to also give her some space versus trying to force her to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So for parents in general, it's useful for them to think about the fact that it's quite possible that their teenagers are going to be experiencing an intense or painful, at times, internal emotional life, and allow for that to be something that influences and impacts their engagement with their youth in ways that they might not think about or expect to be happening. But knowing that it is a reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you were saying too, it impacts the family, and it's just being able just to say, okay, this is where they are, and it's not a forever, right? We all have endings in life, and you go through those ups and downs, and it's being able to say, okay, we're going to help her kind of ride through this place right now where she is. So yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, Karen, before we kind of get to sharing your information, is there a piece of advice that you sometimes share with parents and or maybe teen girls regarding them just being a girl, or identifying as a girl when it comes to the love, sex, romance, and just being you? Is there kind of a general piece of advice or anything like that you give them?
That's interesting. I don't know that anybody's ever asked me that question before. Let's see. So there's two things. With all of my work, whether it's teaching or writing or training sexuality education facilitators, whatever the work may be, in all of my work, what I find is that increasing empathy, both for the self and for the other, is really at the base of everything else. And so if there were one thing that I would say is most important to do for parents and for teens, it would be to try and expand their sense of compassion and empathy. And then when it comes particularly to girls and sexuality, I think that understanding themselves and doing some self-awareness practice and some work, and then trusting themselves enough to really follow through on the answers that they get through a deeper self-knowledge would be, I think, it'd be my biggest recommendation.
Well, both of those tips are incredibly powerful, and empathy and compassion really, they go so far, not just with themselves, but for others. And it makes our world a much happier place when we have compassion and empathy for one another versus the judgment because we're different type of thing. And yeah, and I love it. And I know this age can be so challenging for tweens and teens growing up, but pausing and allowing that intuition to be there, listening to themselves versus constantly kind of looking outside themselves, checking whether it's with social media, magazines, whatever, like, oh, this is what must be the best or what I need to do right now. It's like, nope, listen to yourself and let that help guide you in your process. So I love that. So I am curious, where can our listeners find you? Like, what's your website, and where can they get this book that is now out?
Girl, Love, Sex, Romance, and Being You. It's probably easiest to find on Amazon, although it's probably in some of your local bookstores as well. But definitely available on Amazon. And it's an awesome book. I love the voices of all of the teen writers that you added in, that you mentioned earlier on. So that's the best place to go for that book. I have some other books also available on Amazon. You can look up me, Karen Rayne, Rayne. And then you can also look up on my websites, KarenRayne.com, and then Unhushed.net.
Awesome. I will put all that information into the show notes so listeners can go out and check all that information out. And then I'll list the different books that you have out there as well. So thank you so much, Karen, for being on and talking a little more about your new book that is out. And it's so, again, great information, very, very thorough, tons of great topics, and we literally just touched the iceberg of what you've included in your book. So I'm very excited for the teen girls and the parents to be able to have such knowledge, information, all at their fingertips in one place. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Nicole.
Thank you for listening. And just a reminder, I now offer life coaching for parents, both moms and dads, and being able to support them through sometimes the ups and downs of raising a teenage daughter, or if they're just trying to figure out what to do after their daughter launches, i.e. leaves the home, and trying to figure out who they are again. So feel free to send me an email at nicole@launchingyourdaughter.com, or go out to launchingyourdaughter.com website and you can sign up for the newsletter and you can contact me through there as well. Take care. Thank you for listening to Launching Your Daughter with Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist. For more information or to stay up to date, go to launchingyourdaughter.com. You can sign up for my email list or join my Facebook group. Thank you.